Hey now, welcome to the 13th episode of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been with us all along, well then welcome back. If this is your first time listening to us, well then welcome. Today's quote that I've picked out comes from one of the greatest wordsmiths of our time. That man is Ricky from the Trailer Park Boys. And this quote comes from season 6, episode 4. I had a pretty good sleep, but I still had to get up early this morning because I got responsibles now. I'm grown up, I got kids. A lot of people say you can't smoke dope and get drunk when you have kids, but that's not true. You can, but you still got to get up in the morning. That's being responsible. Being a man. And sure, I'm fucking hungover. I'm burnt out. But that's what being a good dad's all about. So, I chose that quote just because I'm a huge Trailer Park Boys fan. And I'm really excited to have our guest on today. And he happens to be from Canada. And so, we were talking on text messaging and talking about Trailer Park Boys. So I felt like throwing a Trailer Park Boys quote in there. But it also makes a little bit of sense because, much like myself, he is a psychonaut and a dad. And we've talked quite a bit about juggling that. But I'd like to introduce Adam. How you doing there, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely, buddy. And as always, my co-host Stahn is on the line. How are you doing?
Doing good.
So, Adam, you were one of the first people to contact me as well, and we've talked quite a bit through messaging and stuff like that. And I've really enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you, and I'm really glad to be able to get you on to talk here. I know you recently had a mushroom trip. And I'd like to hear about that, but I'd also like to, hear a little background on your psychedelic usage and, where you came from with that and where you are now with that.
Absolutely, you bet. Definitely want to reciprocate everything that you just said. I've really enjoyed getting to know you through the back and forth conversation there and the texting. And your channel kind of came right into view for me right around the perfect time in my life. I had, as a younger kid, 16, 17, 18, I had a few experiences with psychedelics, but not too much. Like growing up all through high school, me and my buddies were known as the green team in high school. So very much into, smoking marijuana. My buddy's dad actually ended up, my best friend through high school, his dad was, they were South African. So it was a very safe haven for us to experiment with marijuana. And he, being from South Africa, he really favored the use of weed over alcohol. So he knew, if we're in their house, it's a safe haven for us to experiment and have some fun. But never really through high school, never really got into any of the harder drugs, the cocaine or anything like that, and really never even drank too much. It was mostly just a lot of smoking weed. So around the age of, I'd say around 17, maybe late 16, early 17, me and a couple friends, we were able to get our hands on some mushrooms. And at that time, I mean, we didn't know what the term set and setting was. We really had no business getting involved with the psychedelic usage. We were just, kind of interested, curious, stupid kids, and we figured we'd try it out. So the first recollection I have of using psilocybin mushrooms was pretty terrible, actually. It was me and one other friend who ended up getting some, but we took it in a setting where it was the two of us and roughly 10 other guys that were all sober, other than, smoking a little bit of weed.
Mhm.
Um, so a really bad situation. I mean, I remember very vividly, we were all sitting there playing wrestling on the Nintendo 64 at the time, and I can remember even the characters. Like I was Kane, and somebody else was the Big Show, and we were having a cage match, and all of a sudden, I had already started feeling a little bit funny, but the open eye visual started with like the colors of the cage and the different wrestlers morphing together, and I wasn't ready for it at all. Like I thought I was going crazy, and then all the guys obviously thought it was funny to be fucking with us the whole time. So uh me and my other friend who did him, he had a very I've always been pretty introverted, pretty into the internal thoughts and the internal journeys, and he's pretty extroverted, so he actually kind of flourished in that situation. He had a great time. But for me, it was just really, you know, like you guys have said in the past, it was one of those trips where the only really good part about it was when it was over. Um, so that ended up kind of turning me off to the entire, I never really wasn't even interested in mushrooms or anything like that for a good decade, over the course of from 18 to the age of 30. Um, Ended up like I have epilepsy as well as I've had a double back fusion. So I ended up getting involved with medical marijuana and continued usage of the marijuana, but never really went down any sort of psychedelic path. So about 6 to 8 months ago, at the age of 30, I came across. I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan podcast, and I was listening to that the one day, and he had Michael Pollan on as a guest. So Michael Pollan was, I had seen different interviews about his book, How to Change Your Mind. But typically, when you see him on a morning talk show or any sort of setting like that, it's just a quick little tidbit, and he's, for the experiences that he had in the book that he wrote, it's not enough time to really get into it. So that longer podcast with Joe Rogan was like a really great, um, platform for him to really get into the experience and really get into the fact that he had had no prior experiences with psychedelics, and explaining proper usage and setting and the ceremonial type setting, proper integration afterwards of the experiences that you're having. And so I kind of got, I basically got sucked into that rabbit hole and got really really interested in that, because up until that time I had been, you kind of different topic but somewhat related, was like we have a lot of religious family, and I had always been more scientific driven. When people would ask me about my faith, I would usually just repeat that well-known quote, about how we are all stardust, and like the iron in your blood and the calcium in your teeth, and everything around you and everything that you're made of, it all came from there. So but I've never really been too much into the organized religion. But I, getting older and having kids, and you seeing your kids growing up and feeling all of those deep emotions, I knew there's more to the spirit than just science. So that really got me interested. I ended up going on. Actually ended up getting my mushrooms from a website, a Canadian-based website. And at the time, I used two different websites because I could only buy like a large quantity from the one website, and I didn't have a scale. So I ended up purchasing just a single gram of psilocybin mushrooms from a different website so that I would have a little bit of a reference. So I didn't end up just sticking my hand in the bag and eating, 7 grams of mushrooms and losing my mind. So around that time, me and my wife had been engaged for a few years. Excuse me. And we were getting ready to get married. We were planning out the marriage and everything. And so I had these mushrooms. I was really into the whole Michael Pollan book. I had just finished the book, and the opportunity presented itself one night to go ahead and go on a nice spiritual trip. And at the time, I had not started any sort of meditation practice, which I'm pretty deep into now. I didn't really know the part of the trip. Part of it, like, it was very significant and very beneficial, but a lot of it was poorly planned just because of all the unknowns for myself. So, I remember when I took it, the speed in which it came on was much quicker than I expected. So actually, my wife and my youngest daughter were still awake when I started to trip a little bit. And so I kind of had to rush them off downstairs, and that kind of got me in a little bit of a anxious mindset, I guess you could say. And then the visuals kind of reminiscent of the high school days, like the walls were breathing a little bit, and I was getting really, really sweaty. So I decided to get into the shower, and when I got out of the shower, I could feel well, like, before I took the mushrooms, I did try to do it in a ceremonial sense, in the fact that I held the dose in a cup and I stated aloud my intentions. And for that trip, my intentions were to uh, kind of to do some soul searching and make sure that I'm going to get up on that altar and marry my wife without any trepidation. Like, I wanted to see if the mushrooms could give me any sort of a inkling as to whether it was a good choice or a bad choice. And I had told my wife that beforehand, and she was all for it. She figured, if we're going to do this, you want to be completely sure. So, not that I wasn't, but for a little bit of added insurance. And so at that point, I'm kind of wandering around the house, really sweaty. I can feel my ego really trying to take over. Like, I need to do this, and I need to do this, and I'm going to do this now. And then I remember just kind of saying to myself, like, this is what I wanted, and this is what I'm going to do. So I made myself lay down flat on my back, and started to experience some of the first clear visuals that I've ever had in my life. Because going back all the way to those high school trips, or that high school trip, I don't think I closed my eyes once. And if I did, I wasn't seeing any I wasn't prepared. I didn't even know that was the thing, to take mushrooms and go for an internal journey. So the first thing I saw was very archetypal, a very archetypal image. It was almost like, I closed my eyes and everything was dark as if it would normally be. And way down in the distance was this blue um, triangle made out of three lines on each side with an eye in the middle. And so I immediately opened my eyes very quickly and kind of thought to myself, like, holy fuck, because I had just finished reading How to Change Your Mind. So I'm also thinking, on a scientific level, I was thinking, oh, my default mode network is shutting down, and I'm starting, the visual cortex is starting to interact with other areas of my brain that it wouldn't normally be acting with. So I was kind of excited. The nerves went away, and I ended up closing my eyes again, and in not in a flesh form, but in a form of, like, it was like red and white with a black background. Clearly saw the image of my wife. And again, it wasn't fleshy. It was like colorful electricity almost, making this image of my wife, and mixed with an overwhelming feeling of love, and almost like a pushiness, where it was almost like the mushrooms were trying to tell me, that's not what we're going to focus on tonight. Everything you have with your wife is perfect, and you go ahead and, say I do. But that's not what we're going to teach you tonight. So I kind of let go of that image a little bit. And I've been very much into music my whole life. I was lucky enough, my parents put me in classical guitar when I was about 8 years old, and kind of moved up throughout, practiced guitar my whole life. I've played at weddings and all that kind of stuff, and jazz band and all that kind of stuff. So I was very interested in the possible the possibility of putting in some music. And Michael Pollan was talking about seeing music in a visual form, so that interested me. So I popped in some headphones, and I had a classical track loaded up on YouTube, and it's some sort of a string quartet. I actually have a screenshot I could maybe send you, Ruben, after. But I've tried to listen to this music sober, and it's you know incredibly boring. It's really not interesting music. But the moment I put in those headphones, I was just amazed. Like I was looking at, again, it was like a blue this time, blue and white sort of electric, not geometric. Like I was looking at the form of the music that I was listening to, and um, it was moving very rapidly. And at that point, I started to feel like any imagery that I was seeing was coming at me like 100 miles an hour. And I couldn't, it almost felt like the face, my skin on my face was getting pulled back, and I was getting like rocketed out, and so I did a very good job, I think, of letting go there. Um, and I've sent Ruben a picture. It's in this book I'm reading called Zigzag Zen, and it's a picture from like 1987, I think, and it was called. And it's kind of ironic because I told my wife the day after that it felt like I had gone on a vacation, and almost like I had, for a brief moment, reached a little bit of that universal consciousness. And this image that I saw was called Dark Rhythms of the Universe. And it's not as if that's exactly what I saw, but if you could take that image and make it the only thing in your visual frame, and then almost as if you're moving through it, like that is as close as I can come to describing what is otherwise like an ineffable moment for myself. So at that point, I kind of like very shockingly, not really awoke because I hadn't fallen asleep, but I opened my eyes and I sat up really quickly, and it had felt like it had been a long time. So I looked down at the iPad or the tablet, and it had only been like 6 minutes of music. So as amazing as it was, at that point I started to get very, very anxious because it was my first experience in over a decade. I hadn't been doing any microdosing or anything, so I really didn't know if this was going to continue. If I was going to continue to see these strong images, if it was going to be 2 hours, if it was going to be 4 hours. I had no time, really nothing to reference for a time of the duration of the trip. So I started getting a little bit nervous, and looking back on that trip, I feel like I wasted a lot of time where I could have been taking a meaningful internal journey. And I just started doing a lot of like, it was summertime, so I walked out to the yard and I was looking at, our garden and a lot of interesting stuff around the house. But every time I would look at the clock, it was almost as if time had just stopped moving. Like if I was doing activities and thinking they had taken like an extended amount of time, and then I'd look at my clock and it was like 2 minutes, and I thought, holy fuck, like how long is this gonna last? I was getting anxious, and I would continue to try to lay down for brief moments, but I was getting very overwhelmed. So eventually I ended up actually opening up a pack of like freezies, like Mr. Freezies, and I ate about 30 of those, and then I could feel, that was kind of how I pulled the chute on that one, and because kind of slowed things down a little bit, and then towards the end, it was kind of doing that classic hitting me in waves. Like I thought, okay, I'm pretty much down, and then it would hit me again, and I'd be feeling the same that I had before, and kind of waved off, and then I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, and I wrote down a few meaningful things. Like I wrote down, because of how distorted my sense of time became on that trip, I wrote that time when you have a family is very important, and the most important thing we can really do as a father is to give your time to your kids, right? Like it's a simple thing, but it's one of those truths that really rings clear, especially after an experience like that. So it's kind of the message I got.
It's like a blessing and a curse, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you want to try to, before my kids I was Adam, and now I'm dad first and I'm Adam second, but you don't want all of your qualities to dwindle just because you're a father. You need to try to balance that, right? So that was a big reason why I was hoping to get on this platform, because I'm sure you have a lot of listeners who it's got to be the same for them, where you got all these responsibilities and you got to meet all the responsibilities, but you got to try to carve out a little bit of time for yourself as well, especially for some spiritual growth. Um, so after that, my wife and my family actually saw quite a bit of a positive afterglow. Um, excuse me. So, and at the time, actually, I had been only about 3 months cigarette free. And one of the big things I found the day after, like, it really does a good job of breaking down sort of habitual thoughts in your mind. I find that the next day, like, the juices in my brain were flowing a lot better, and I was able to make a lot more decisions where instead of, spending some time with my kids and thinking about smoking a cigarette, I was completely with my kids. Like, I wasn't, it altered my thought process a little bit in a positive way, I think. Um, so then at that time, I also, because of how, like, I didn't expect at that dose, I believe I took the 1 gram on its own, and then I took a little bit more. I thought I was around about 1.5 grams, and my wife thinks it was maybe a bit closer to 2. Um, but the experience was just, it was much heavier and much more intense than I had expected. So, excuse me, after that experience, I figured, I need to get myself going on a little bit of a spiritual path. And one of the things I wrote down after that trip as well, and not to, I hope the comment boxes doesn't blow up with, religious comments, and I don't want to start a religious conversation really, but with a lot of organized religion, they rely on faith, and they don't want to give the individual direct access to the divine. Whereas I found after that trip, I didn't, there's no faith involved. Like, I saw everything and I experienced it all. And I know now that I'm back down to base reality that there's more than that to be experienced. So I found, I still consider myself basically an agnostic who's picking up some Buddhist tendencies that would, help cultivate good relationships in my life and everything. But, yeah, the theology that requires a lot of faith compared to something like this that, it is giving you direct access to the divine on an individual level, which I thought was just amazing. So I was kind of hooked right away. I knew right after that I would be just trying to sprinkle in these heavier trips throughout the rest of my life. Whether as I get older, maybe I'll end up doing less and less. But I found it just incredibly beneficial. So over the next kind of 6 months, 8 months, I ended up doing a lot of starting to try and do a lot of meditation, which at first was probably just like any other kind of any Westerner, or really anybody who's not, doesn't do the meditation. The first couple times I sat down, I probably was sitting for, 2 minutes, and I couldn't get any of my thoughts to quiet. And I just remember thinking, like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, is this, I just sit down and close my eyes? Is that all there is to it? And then little bit more research I would do, for me, what I found really works well is I'm not trying to silence my thoughts. Like, if there are some thoughts, let them go by, but don't cling to them. And I always come back to my breath. So it's been all about breathing and all about learning to sit down and just be there with yourself. And you can't sit down in the moment and be thinking, I need to get on my phone for this or that, or got to shovel the driveway after this. Like, if you can even reach just a few moments of clarity where you're really not thinking about anything except for your breath, I found that it was beneficial to this next trip that I will tell you about. But I also find it's just beneficial in, yeah, I mean, right from the moment we wake up, our brain is getting bombarded with all these sensory input, right? So to just be able to sit down for a few minutes a day, it almost felt like it was increasing the quality of the time towards the end of the day, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Like, yeah. So that's kind of, the the path that I ended up taking. And then there's been several times. So this video that you just put up, Ruben, the New Year's Day trip report, was a huge help to me, because there have been many times throughout the past 6 to 8 months where I have a trip planned and just doesn't work out, right? There's lots of the kids ended up having an extra activity that I wasn't aware of, or whatever the case. A lot of it was Christmas and working overtime and being exhausted, and you know the workplace that I work at is not really conducive to any sort of spiritual growth. It's a lot of a lot of big, angry muscular guys moving around pallets all day, and lots of negativity that you kind of got to try to swim throughout the day and come out positive at the end of it. But there's no complaining there. I mean, it's a great paying job and allows me to take care of my family. But so I ended up canceling of quite a few trips, and then I'm on vacation now. I got a few days off, and Monday of this week, it's Thursday today. On the Monday, I had everything planned out to a T. I had everything. It was really well planned out. I had my candles. I had my room with my sitting, about a 3x4, nice comfortable pad to sit on. I had a blanket in case it got hot. I had a fan in case it got cold. The showers right across the hall in case I needed the shower. I had my guitar in case I felt like playing music. Had my boots and my jacket ready to go for a walk if that was the case, even though it's about -40 out right now. And basically what happened that Monday night, I got the kids to bed and everything. Wife was at work, perfect opportunity. And just remembering how overwhelmed I was at certain parts of that first experience, it was, I just had like the craziest anxiety attack I've ever had. Like my heart was about to jump out of my throat. So I kind of justified in my head by saying to myself, I could do this tonight with all this anxiety, feeling as tired as I am, or I have basically the same scenario on the next night, the Tuesday night. So I ended up kind of pussing out on that one, going to bed early, got a good sleep or whatever. Woke up the next day pretty much determined to just avoid all social media and to get through the day, trying to meditate several times throughout the day, trying to keep a calm demeanor. And then I came across your YouTube video there, Ruben, and I figured, well, he's always got good advice. So I'm not gonna go on Facebook, but I'm gonna watch this video. And not only did it like put me in just a great mood and had me laughing, but there were just so many similarities between what you described and what I had been feeling the night before, with a little bit of anxiety. And so I figured it's also one of those things where like I don't have a ton of people in my daily life that I can talk to about these topics. So knowing you're out there, we're so far apart, but there you are going on your trips and fighting through all of the tougher part of your trips to come out with a positive effect. It just kind of reminds you, even though in the back of my head I know I'm not the only one doing this stuff, it's nice to hear a brother tell his story as well. So it kind of got me really amped up, really ready to go ahead and take the plunge. So I think it was the right choice too, not doing it on the Monday, because I had so much anxiety. And so then I guess I'll get into the trip that I had on Tuesday night here. But one of the things I'd like to start by saying is that, like, if you had given me if I had gone through these two trips with two different kind of blank doses, like if you had given me psilocybin 6 to 8 months ago and I went through the trip that I went through, and then you had given me another mystery drug and didn't tell me what it was, the experience on Tuesday was, it was so vastly different that I wouldn't even have thought that it was the same substance, to be honest. Like, it was so much different. And I think I'd like to thank meditation for a huge part of that, because I mean, even some of the stuff that I'm reading today, it talks about how Terrence McKenna used to always say that singing or humming is a really good thing to do when you're experiencing a difficult trip. And the whole idea behind it is to, oxidize your brain. The meditation for me had always been so much, and I'm a very beginner meditator. Let's make that clear. I'm no master, but I've got so good at focusing on the breath, which I think is the important thing. Um, so I had a really, really, therapeutic is the best word I can use, a really beneficial therapeutic trip on Tuesday night. So what I did was around, got everybody to bed around 9. It was about 9:15 that I went ahead and took my dose, which was just a straight 2-gram dose. And then I had another gram set aside as a booster, because I wasn't sure, like these are different mushrooms than I took back in July there. So I wasn't really sure. I had done some microdosing with these, which I think might also play a part in why like this trip was much gentler, much less of a rocket ride. I think some of it has to do with the meditation, some of it has to do with watching that video that you put out, Ruben, and being in a really good mindset. Like I wasn't anxious at all. I was very excited actually. But so I took the 2 grams, and within about 5 minutes, I ended up throwing up. I had been about 11 hours without food that day, roughly. I really wanted a very empty stomach to try to, I was looking for a rocket ride, to be honest, and threw up very, very quickly, and kind of tried to guess, the amount that I had thrown up, and I figured it was in the neighborhood of about a half a gram. Like I didn't throw everything up. So I just went ahead and took my booster immediately. So I'm guessing that put me in about a 2.5-gram dose that was able to stay in my stomach there. So ended up taking that, and it was a very slow start. Like there was, I felt sweaty before I had any sort of funny feelings, or any sort of visual textural change of anything in the room. So I went ahead and hopped in the shower. I've only done now, I guess, 2 big trips in the last 12 years, and I find the shower is a really good go-to for me. I'm not sure why. It's a comforting, nice warm water. It's a comforting thing to do, I find. So took the shower, and then I took all these mushroom notes, which my wife was laughing about because I reviewed them after with her, but like lots of it is in crayon. That was the one thing I did not plan out very well. As I started to trip, I thought I need to take some notes so I can, try to recount this as accurately as possible with these guys, because I knew we were going to do this episode. So she thought that was kind of funny, and I'll send you a picture of these, Ruben, because they do look. It looks like a madman's, But so after the shower, came into the room and had the candles going and just sat in my area, and I started a Tibetan. I found a Tibetan music meditation track on YouTube. It's a 6-hour kind of repetitive flute type music. And it's what I've been meditating to when I'm sober, or even if sometimes I'll do an edible or a little bit of a microdose and smoke a joint or something. But it's always the same music. I find this music syncs up with my breath really well. I try to do. I don't think about it anymore, but it's about 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, and I'm really focusing at that point in between breaths where it's just pure silence with no movement. And so put on that track, and everything, like I say, everything started it was all slow. It was all gentle and slow. I was expecting again to get, there was a part of that first initial trip where like I said, the visuals were coming so quick. It was almost like my face was being pulled back and I was just ripping through space. With this, the visuals at the beginning were weak visuals, I would say. They weren't as intense, and I was grasping for some, structure in what I was seeing. And during that period, like I saw I wrote down a lot of stuff that wasn't, I don't think, too meaningful. I saw like a hand with a dagger, and the dagger turned into a snake. Um, I saw something. I've been looking at a picture a lot lately called Boom Shiva, and it's a picture of like a Shiva with like a galaxy in his hand, and I saw something kind of similar to that galaxy in the hand, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, and I guess I should state also, when I went on this trip, I held the mushrooms in my cup and I stated aloud my intentions, which I think, I'm not sure if you're actually talking to the spirit of the mushroom or if you're kind of just priming your subconscious for what you're looking for. But I do like to do that because I find, and again, I'm not very experienced with these trips, but for the two major trips that I've had, I'll state my intentions out loud, and then I really do seem to get that what I'm looking for out of the trip. Um, so for this one, everything's going pretty good in my life right now. So all I stated out loud was that I would like to, because I've been meditating, that I would like to continue to open my heart to all the love around me and all the love that is in the universe. And I also stated that I'm very interested in astronomy and astrophysics and all that kind of stuff. So I thought maybe if it could give me a glimpse into any sort of galactic, whether it's stars forming or anything like that. And I never did get there with this trip, but I did see a little bit of imagery of the galaxy there. Um, and then everything started to get a little more clear, and at that point I saw a basically a mouth. It looked like a mouth of a beast, like a very big mouth, almost carved out of stone. And it was clear that this mouth was like the opening to a cave. And in my last trip, oh, I forgot to say, so in my last trip, one of the things that I was disappointed about as well was that anytime I saw something even slightly menacing or slightly scary, what I would do was I would just open my eyes and that visual would go away and I'd start over again. And you had mentioned, Ruben, that you had seen jesters in this last trip of yours.
Yeah.
And back in June, July trip there, I ended up one of the visuals that I saw that will never go away, that I'm really upset that I didn't dig deeper into, was it was a clear as day, a jester, a very large jester, and you could see his head basically resting on his arms, and his arms were over a big wooden box. Um, and since then, I've asked my wife several times. I was hoping to kind of come across that again in this trip, and what I have found is that no two trips are the same. So I don't think I'll ever find out what was in that box. But I was determined this time around that if I saw anything scary, that I'm just gonna stand right up to it and see what does this signify? What does this represent? So when I saw that it was an opening to a cave, I immediately went inside without any hesitation, kind of walked through this cave, and in a very short distance, like it wasn't a long winding cave or anything. It was almost like I walked 2 or 3 feet down the cave, and then I looked up and the cave had no roof, and all I saw was just a beautiful, like, starry night sky. Um, and I don't know if that maybe kind of signified just how facing your fear is always a good thing. Like, I mean, even today, getting ready to do this podcast with you guys, I was a little bit nervous, and I figured, I mean, that little voice in the back of my head is saying, well, maybe you just shouldn't do this because you're going to sound like an idiot. And, I think in general in life, you gotta, the first thing that's always going to stop you from doing something that you want to do, it's always going to be yourself. It's always going to be that voice in
Absolutely.
your head. So if you can get past that, and then, so I mean, I ended up grabbing a crayon to write some of this stuff down, but most of what I was seeing, I don't think was very, um, like I wasn't seeing a lot of anything that I could grasp any true meaning from. But I also, like, I wrote down tentacle disco room, where at one part I was seeing an image, like I was almost like in a room with like disco lights, but all of these lights were emanating from uh like tentacle arms in the middle of the room. So that was pretty cool. But I mean, that doesn't have, I don't think, any significant meaning. So I wrote in big letters and I circled that already have love in my life. Um, and so that a lot of the imagery, like I was seeing a lot of blooming, a lot of nature blooming, a lot of flowers blooming. I was seeing mushrooms growing and then turning into stone, which was kind of interesting.
Hmm.
But like I've never taken ecstasy, and at one point I was doing a lot of what I would call open eye meditation too, where I was opening my eyes, especially because I had quite a few joints rolled up to smoke, and every time I would open my eyes to smoke a joint, the atmosphere in the room, like I was feeling so much love. I was feeling so good, and like the flickering of the flame across every surface of the room was just beautiful. And rather than the first trip where I kept looking at my watch thinking, holy fuck, like when is this going to be over? Is this going to be over? This time around, it was the opposite, where I would look at my watch and realize I've been sitting here for 45 minutes and it felt like a blink of an eye, and I really wanted it to last. It was kind of the opposite. I didn't want it to go away. I wanted it to last. Um, but yeah, I mean, with this trip, there was no ego loss at all. I was thinking very strictly in terms of I the entire time. It was, the sense of I did not disappear. Which during that first trip, that 6 minutes of music, like I would say that was as close as I've ever come to like a transcendence type of a experience where I forgot, I didn't even know I was in my living room anymore at that point. So that kind of stuff didn't happen this time. It was all much more smooth. And so one of the things, like I was talking to you about, Ruben, I think the very next day I told you, I only have a couple more days off in this vacation, and I'm going to, I'm thinking about doing these again on Friday because I didn't quite get to where I thought I was going to get. Like it wasn't as intense as I was expecting. But then upon a little more integration and a little more thought, like I've been thinking nonstop the last couple of days about what happened and what it all might mean. And it takes a while to kind of get those aha moments. And one of the things I've been reading in a lot of my Buddhist books is about not clinging to the peak experiences. I think, like I said earlier, I think it gave me basically what I asked for and what I needed. And at this point in my life, there's nothing terrible going on. I don't have any, relationship issues. I don't have any work issues. Really, everything is great. My kids are growing up great. My two older stepdaughters are going to be 12 and 13, but my biological daughter is just turning 4, so I'm getting to see all these magic moments of her life right now. So what I think I might do, instead of trying to chase and push another experience, is probably just continue to do my micro doses over the course of the next 4 to 6 months, and wait till I have another a week off, and then try to fit another really good meaningful large trip into there. But the one thing, yeah, I think trying to push, and I think you even kind of echoed that message in your video, where maybe you could have waited another week or whatever it was. Like trying to push the experience sometimes I don't think is a good idea. So
Yeah, I mean, you can't force enlightenment, and you definitely can't force the timing to do that, but I like what you just said there, to not focus on the peak experience, and that you just kind of felt the love that was already there and stuff like that. I think a lot of times with psychedelics, people are seeking big answers to big questions, when another very powerful aspect of psychedelics can just be affirmation, and like that can be one of the most therapeutic parts of them, because we can get so stuck in our stressful, anxiety filled lives. We're like, I don't know if I'm doing things right. I don't know if I'm on the right path. I don't know if I'm with the right person. And for the mushrooms to comfort you and say, you're doing great. Like that's fucking really important. You know, you don't need to see machine elves and jesters and whatever to get a benefit from that. Like just feeling at peace is very powerful.
Absolutely. You actually just gave me some goosebumps there in the wording that you use. Like it is affirmation isn't a word I thought of, and that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what was going on that night.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the way that because I mean I give you props for the way your adult usage of psychedelics, that you're doing it right. You know, reading the literature and getting the advice and the tactics from that. You know, I think is very important. That's why I'm always talking about the books and quotes and literature, because I think that's really important. It's great to watch YouTube videos and listen to podcasts, but if someone can write a whole book, especially the size of Michael Pollan's book, like if you can write a book that's that well received by people that aren't psychonauts, and it's that friggin' large and dense, like that dude has some shit to say, you know, like I mean, he trumps any YouTuber out there, you know, like, I mean, because if you can compile all that, and you're a YouTuber, like, why would you waste your time on YouTube? You should be writing books like that, you know? So, you know, going through the literature, doing the meditation and breath work and just all the stuff that you're saying you're doing, and timing and planning, and also, like you said, knowing tonight's not the night and not trying to force it. You're doing a great job there, and I think you know, the mushroom will reward you with that. You know, that's respecting the substance, like everyone always talks about. You know, yeah, and so yeah, and like for me personally, when I'm respecting the substance and I know you know, I don't have some huge intention and stuff like that, that's when I have a good time. Like with my last video, which I mean, the synchronicity and the timing of that is insane, you know, to you. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other people out there that haven't said anything, that it was good for them as well. And perfect timing. You know, it's it's when I try to push the envelope or experiment and be like, I wonder what this is going to do. I wonder what happens if I take 3.5 grams of rue or whatever, you know, like that's when I end up going like, fuck, you know, and having a bad time. And so I think that's really important for everyone to really just like, you know, obviously you have to experiment a little bit to come up with it, but to find your routine and then learn how to, you know, explore within that routine. But once you have that kind of like, you know, security blanket of knowing like this dosage does this to me and it's not going to overwhelm me past this certain point, as long as, you know, setting settings right. I think that's like the most important part about dosage and stuff like that, is just being comfortable with it almost, you know. If you're not looking for a heroic dose, like scary, you know, rewire your brain kind of thing, you know, I think there's a lot to be gained from actually, you know, just kind of knowing what you're getting into. And you know, I don't push the envelope like crazy like some people do, but I'm like always kind of tweaking it a little bit to see. And I think that's why I have a little bit you know, more anxiety and stuff like that, because I just don't know, you know, what's going to happen, because I've, you know, always trying something new. So, you know, I think, but I think like your pre-trip prep and stuff like that is excellent, you know, and that's really motivating for me actually, because, you know, I mean, sometimes I don't even tell my wife I'm doing it. Well, I mean, the Syrian Rue one, I didn't tell her until I put the video up, actually, because I don't know if she watches the videos actually, but yeah, like yeah, I was like, oh, so anyway, the other night this happened.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with you so much. It's and a lot too, you know, I hate to go back to even giving these guys, you know, any notification or, you know, any life in their sales, but you know, the trolls or whatever that do go on and say, you know, that's not a heroic dose, or that's not, you know, this and that, and you should take more. And it's you know, I think if you, I don't really have the experience to say this, but from what I've read, a lot of if you're always taking a dose that's so large that you're going to push past any discomfort and you're just going to rocket yourself into space and beautiful imagery and all that kind of stuff, like it's I think sometimes it's the lower doses that leave you somewhat uncomfortable and leave you with a little bit of wits. Those are the ones that are really going to be fruitful in the end, that are really going to you're going to look back and you're going to have learned something from it. And I do think that's important, especially growing up. Like, I'm not doing these to party anymore. So if I'm not getting any sort of a benefit out of it at the end, then there's not a huge there's not really any reason to be doing it in the first place. So
yeah, it's uncomfortable, like to have the doses where like your ego can still fight back. But there is something to be gained from learning how to overcome that. I mean, it's like a workout, for your brain almost and your soul. And, I think, if you do it well, you strengthen your psyche almost, to where, like, I mean, it's the problem I seem to have. There's definitely people that can do higher dosages and, gain some inner peace from it and can, describe the experience, eloquently and stuff like that. But it seems like it almost strengthens the ego of a lot of people because of the attitude of, it's not worth doing anything other than high dosages. And
I also think it's almost like a little bit irresponsible to be trying to tell people that that's the only way to go. Like, I think if you don't have experience with the substance, you always want to start low and just see where you can go from there. And if you, like you said, if you are one of those people that can handle like a higher dose, then that's great. But and I also found that I found it very beneficial to what is now, I mean, and again, being a dad, I don't get to meditate every day. And if I do, it might only be for 5 minutes. It might be, if I'm lucky, it might be for 35 minutes. But the longest I had ever sat in a sober state and meditated prior to this Tuesday night was about 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes if I'm pushing it. And on this night, on Tuesday night there, like, I didn't touch my guitar, I didn't do anything. I sat in that meditative state for, by the time, excuse me, I stopped the soundtrack, it had been 3 hours and 4 minutes of so I feel it's almost like a beneficial type of a circular, I practice the meditation and that gets me stronger and more able to orient myself into a trip, and then that trip, I'm meditating for so long that then falls back into strengthening my daily meditation, which then in turn will strengthen my ability to get through my next trip, I believe. So I think that's kind of like a beneficial cycle. And I do believe, I've read a lot. There's a lot of, especially in the Buddhist community, there's a lot of mixed reviews on, do psychedelics have a place in spiritual growth or meditative growth? And I think if you are a busy person even if you don't have kids, there's still tons of people out there, they don't have kids, but they're still strapped for time and energy. And if you can't, if you don't have the time to, because meditation, I look at it more, it's not a religion, it's a practice. It's something that I practice. And if you don't have the time to perfect your practice, I feel like these are very useful tools in kind of jump starting your, your level of expertise or your level of ability to practice the meditation. So I thought that was really beneficial as well.
Yeah, for sure. Have you, have you ever done any float tanks, or do they even have them up there? I guess they probably up there they probably free solid, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, right now, yeah, we're hitting, -40, -50 sometimes right now. I actually took me and my dad took my daughter sledding yesterday, and we were only out for about 20 minutes, and my mustache was just like a brick of ice after. But it's funny you say the float tank thing though, because I have, to my knowledge, in Manitoba, like even in the bigger city of Winnipeg, we don't have any. And I've mentioned to my wife how, I don't know, we don't have a lot of finances to play with, but might it might not be a terrible idea to go visit the bank and kind of lay out a plan of like somebody's going to be the first,
Yeah,
somebody's going to
for
bring
sure.
them.
Yeah.
Because no, yeah. So short answer, no. I've never had the ability to try that out, but I've heard you talking about it. I used to listen to Joe Rogan talk about it as well, and it sounds like it would be a really perfect place to practice that type of. And I guess
Oh.
that's essentially what you're doing is a little meditation in the tank. So
Well, I mean, I like before I was a parent, I used to meditate, and I went through a big, like, kind of reading about Zen Buddhism and stuff like that, and then was like getting books on meditation and stuff like that, and but I found as a parent I could never do it until I discussed, and it was through the Joe Rogan podcast, and hearing him talk about it. I had read about it from John Lee and stuff like that, and thought it was cool. And I remember there was a Simpsons episode that had him in there. And then when I heard Joe Rogan talking about it, I was like, oh shit, all right, I gotta look these up and whatever. And I wasn't able to kind of meditate until, as a parent, until I discovered the float tanks, and I mean it's pretty awesome. I mean it's, and even if not for meditation, like even if someone doesn't, isn't able to meditate or doesn't want to, like my wife, like she just likes going in there and thinking, like she like, I've had some crazy kind of, trips in there, and like kind of, timelessness and stuff like that. And she just kind of floats around in there and thinks about like stuff to do at work and stuff like that. But that's not a waste. Like it's very calming and peaceful for her that way,
oh, you
it,
bet. That's still crossing all cross all your T's and dot all your I's while you're in there.
well, and distraction free. And that's the biggest thing for her is just, it's a guaranteed hour that, a kid isn't going to come in and need you to do something, and no one's going to bother you.
Well, that's great. That's really great.
Yeah.
What's it like there? Like what do you guys end up like? What do they charge you for an hour float?
So the place that I go to, I think if you just go and just do a float, it's like $70 or something like that. But you can sign up for, like, you can go like once a month, and then if you don't go, it carries over, and it like every month, like it charges your card like $50, I think. And so if you don't go, then like you can go twice the next month, or whatever. Which I don't think I went last month, so I probably actually could go twice this month. But yeah, and so, and then any other time you go, it's like just $50. So like they try to sign you up for these packages. I think it's $200 a month to go whenever you want, as long as they're open. But I mean, like unlimited floats is like 200 a month, which honestly is worth it. I mean, those things cost like, I don't know, like 10 grand or so, I think, or maybe even more.
That's
So
pretty interesting.
yeah.
Um, oh, the one thing I kind of wanted to mention just for anybody who might have been like myself, like I heard you talking about how the Xanax was a really good if you are in a situation where you need to pull the ripcord, that works out really well. Um, for myself, like I was thinking about that a little bit on Tuesday night, just in case. It was the same situation as you, where you started off around 9 o'clock, and I wanted to be in bed, before 2 o'clock, basically. Um, and so I don't have any access to Xanax or anything like that. So what I ended up doing, I just spent the whole day on an empty stomach, and then I went to McDonald's, and I got like four different burgers and set them on the counter there. So I don't know. I was kind of wanted to ask you guys, because I know you might be more knowledgeable than me, whether that would be more of a placebo effect, or if actually filling up your stomach would kind of offset the effect of the psilocin that's going through your brain.
Uh,
It did seem to slow everything down a little bit for me, but at that point, I'm already coming down at that point, so I'm not sure.
yeah.
It might
I
be
mean,
more of just like a safety blanket.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure by that point, like, there wasn't much psilocybin in your stomach. So I don't know if it would do anything. It's probably just a grounding, like comforting thing more than anything else. Um, yeah. I mean, I do recommend for anyone that's had, um, you know, anxiety and stuff like that. The Xanax and Valium, are quick acting, right? So they're like an emergency kind of thing. If anyone wants to, and I understand if people don't have access to it being a prescription and stuff like that, but if anyone's worried about that or has had a problem, Phenibut, you have to take quite a while ahead of time, about 2 or 3 hours ahead of time. But that is available just on eBay. I mean, there's I don't think there's any restrictions on it at all, because I believe it's in like some drinks and stuff like that. And so that works really good. And what I liked about it, I've only done it once with mushrooms, but what I liked about it is it doesn't remove any of the visual and mystical aspect of it. It just chills you out, and it chills out the anxiety, the pre trip anxiety, which that's something I wanted to talk about too with your visuals, where you're mentioning about scary things. Is my anticipation of seeing scary visuals is what bothers me, or not even if I'm worried about visuals, but it's the anxiety and anticipation that I have a tough time with on trips. I've never seen anything that I'm actually scared of. And so, and what you were saying that you were going to do of facing your fear and your scary visual. And, I've heard a good tactic of saying, like, what do you want from me? Why are you trying to scare me?
What I was essentially in my mind, what I was basically saying to these visuals were, what do you represent?
Yeah.
What are you trying to show me?
Yeah.
And
that's the way to handle it.
I think you primed me a little bit too, listening to your video, because I did see, ironically enough, I saw a little bit of what you were talking in your New Year's video of heads that would, if you tried to look directly at them, would turn into a skull, that type of a thing.
Yeah.
I saw that exact thing, but what was happening again, like, because it wasn't making any fear rise in me, everything that was somewhat of a vicious or scary visual to begin with, they all bloomed into something beautiful. Like, I mean, I actually remember at one point visualizing like a pretty clear sunset over an ocean, with this beautiful music going beside me and everything. And I remember thinking back to a DMT trip report that I had heard about once, where this guy was seeing butterflies and clouds and flowers and everything was great. And then all of a sudden everything turned to fucking shit. And he ended up having like a really difficult, challenging trip. And I remember thinking to myself, like, almost like these mushrooms are being so good to me tonight. When is it going to turn into a challenging moment? And the only thing that I can even think of that was, remotely challenging was when I did start to peak. Most of what I was seeing that night were solid visuals, not so much geometric patterns. But at one point when I was kind of peaking, and I'm listening to this Tibetan music, I was seeing a lot of I guess what you would describe, like the geometric visuals matched the music in the sense that they were almost like tribal or like Mesopotamian looking type visuals. But I remember as those started to hit me one after another, and that speed started to go up, I just started to focus on my breath again. And then slowly but surely, everything kind of calmed back down, and I was able to grasp everything that I was looking at, which was really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, to try. For anyone like scared of visuals or anything like that, and I've mentioned it before, is nitrous. That now it doesn't slow anything down. It ramps it up for about 3 minutes maybe, but it also it dissociates you, so you're not scared of it, and it kind of so it does what everyone that uses the Terrence McKenna method of like smoking joints as soon as you start coming on. That doesn't work for me, but nitrous does what people describe the joints doing. It just kind of, it's like a rocket booster through any scary shit.
And gets you into orbit.
Right. And then it kind of lowers you back down. And then when you come back down, you're definitely still where you were, but you're not scared about it anymore. Like, so it can really increase visuals as well. Unfortunately, on my New Year's Day trip, I didn't have that. I was out, and that was another reason I should have waited too. But that's in the past. But I think I could have totally had a completely different experience if I would have had nitrous. Just because and it comes down to part of the safety blanket I was talking about. I think, that I'm used to that. I'm used to like, oh, I'm, getting anxious, need some nitrous and blast myself through that anxiety. And I didn't have that. So I didn't have that safety blanket, but, I really recommend that for people to try too.
Yeah. I'm going to maybe actually, I might look into trying that next time and see how that affects me. Yeah, I found the first time I was under the impression that smoking, I've kind of figured, oh, maybe if I smoke this joint, everything will slow down. And yeah, no, it does the opposite. The weed seems to speed it all up. But on Tuesday night there, I found it more of basically what I think it is for me is, especially after you've hit that certain level where things you can't even wrap it up anymore. Like you're peaked. For me, it was more of, I think it's because I used to be a smoker. I've quit smoking now for about 9 months, this month, which I'm very proud of. But yeah, it was having just something to smoke. I think is more what it was, having something in my hand, and just part of the security blanket. But
I've recently quit smoking over the last couple of months, and I still do like nicotine lozenges and stuff like that. But my last 3 trips have been without cigarettes. Or actually, I bought a pack for one trip, and then I smoked a cigarette, and it made me feel terrible. So I threw the pack away. But I think that was something that kind of needed to happen too, honestly. But that had been, most of the time, the last couple years, when I would trip, I would smoke at least a pack of cigarettes in that night during the trip. In 4 hours, of a mushroom trip, I would smoke a whole pack of cigarettes.
Just chain smoking.
Yeah.
I could see that for sure. It's just,
and I think I started, and I think I had more anxiety once I didn't have that habit to do while I was there, So, I
can see that for sure.
Yeah. But, So I wanted to ask you, you mentioned way back at the start there, that you ordered mushrooms from a website in Canada. Is that part of the policy that,
Well, yeah, no, I think it's a little bit in the gray area.
Yeah,
it's definitely not. Yeah, psilocybin is still definitely not a legal substance here. But yeah, actually that whole experience was kind of weird, because I had been used to ordering, for my medical marijuana, for my epilepsy and my back pain. I get that online, and it's a award-winning company, really good customer service. If you send them an email, they get back to you right away, that kind of a thing. Whereas this website was called Mungus, so it's like fungus with an M, mungus.ca, and they were selling a half ounce of mushrooms for $77 at the time, and so I figured that'd be great. But they were really slow. Took my e-transfer immediately, and then really slow to respond to some emails and that kind of a thing. So I actually thought maybe I had just kind of given my money away to somebody who had a, kind of a fake business going or whatever. But they did end up showing up in the mail a couple weeks after. It was pretty slow to get here. And then I ordered the 1 gram mushroom to kind of be able to get an idea of weight, which I ended up also borrowing my brother's scale a couple weeks after that and measuring the half ounce all into grams. So that way, if I want to microdose, I'll take a gram and split it up into 5 different servings or whatever. And yeah, I ended up getting that 1 gram from a website called Mail Order Marijuana. Actually, they had some golden teacher mushrooms up there as well. But one thing I have noticed since the legalization of cannabis in Canada here is a lot of those weed websites are now, you look for the mushrooms and they're not on there anymore. And I think it's because they're allowed to sell the weed now. They've just all decided, selling this one substance that can maybe get us booted off of here isn't worth it anymore. So yeah, they're kind of hard to come by. That's why the ones that I have, I'm pretty much, saving them up for the experiences down the road. But I have really gotten in the last 6 months into the microdosing. I'm really interested in the talk. Like, I heard you and Stahn talking quite a bit about the LSD microdosing, and I did read the article that you sent me on LSD in regards to epilepsy and stuff. I think it's more, again, a little bit more of a fear thing. I've never tried it, and it's something that interests me maybe in the future. But for now, the mushrooms they're here. So it's not like I need to find them or anything. And yeah, I had a couple instances where I hit it a little too high. I think I was probably close to about a half a gram on an empty stomach, where you don't start tripping, but like if you're trying to look after your kids or anything, it's a little bit much. And then I actually don't use a scale now when I microdose. I've gotten pretty used to eyeballing about a 0.2. And I'll do that with some food in my stomach, and it's what I call the sweet spot. Like, it gives me that little glow throughout the day, and a little bit of an extra boost. It really, I love to do the microdose and listen when you guys put out a new podcast, because it really gets my thoughts flowing. Like, removes all the concrete and kind of lubes up all the gears in my brain for sure. So
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed doing that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as the epilepsy, for the purposes of microdosing, the difference between psilocybin microdosing and LSD microdosing, I wouldn't say that they're enough to risk a possible epileptic episode from LSD, but I mean, I also, with that article and other stuff, like I think the risk was psychedelics in general and epilepsy and schizophrenia. Like, I don't know. It's I'm not worried about either of those for me. I don't have, those worries that there's no one in my family that's schizophrenic, and I don't have epilepsy, and I've never had any problems with that. So it's easy for me to say, like, I wouldn't worry about it. But, I mean, I would look at the research, the scientific research with that, because that's definitely stuff they've looked at, and that's one reason I hope policy changes sooner than later, so that they can do, more extensive research with that. No,
and I agree. I think, it's more like I'm lucky as well. Like, I didn't for the psilocybin, even I didn't hop right into it. I kind of looked through, like, my parents and the rest of my family knows this is kind of the path that I'm on at the moment. And the epilepsy was a little bit of a worry for some of them, but we have no family history of any dementia or schizophrenia or anything like that might, a psychedelic experience might kind of kickstart that sort of a disorder.
Yeah.
But for the psych, or for the use of LSD, I'd like to try it one day just to see the differences. My only really worry in regards to the epilepsy is more just of a duration,
Yeah.
and I guess like you said, if you're microdosing, maybe the differences aren't big enough to be too worried about it. Whereas an all out LSD trip, I wouldn't, at this point in my life, there's no real room for it anyways. So that's
Right.
something,
Yeah.
that'll come down in the years. And I'm lucky that way too. I'm only 30 years old, so by the time my youngest hits 18, I'll be 45. So I still have a lot of. I look at this whole thing as, I'm at the. I've taken maybe a couple steps past the start line on my spiritual and theogenic path, and I've got quite a way to go, and I'm just excited to see what it all brings over the years. It's one thing that I couldn't help but you were saying that you did your one trip and ended up going on a cruise the next day, and all
Yeah.
the gluttony and everything was kind of like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
And I've really had an interesting time going out into public after my two large trips. I just keep looking at people and thinking, a lot of these people they're never going to realize some of the potential that their brain, holds. They're never, because I don't think, one thing that I've been thinking a lot of lately is that I don't think that life is a big question to be answered. I think it's more of just an experience
Yeah.
of, we're supposed to experience the joy and the sadness and all of these human features that are here for us to experience. And a lot of people, because of the war on the drug culture and a lot of the taboos that have been put out there, a lot of people aren't going to get to experience that before they come to the end of their time on this earth. And so I feel very fortunate to be, have the loved ones surrounding me with, they all know that I'm smart about the usage, and they all support it. So it's really great that way. But and a
Awesome.
little bit off beat, I guess. I've been listening to Alan Watts quite a bit lately on just different talks on YouTube. And one thing that I thought about on Tuesday night there, because I kept opening my eyes, and like I say, the feeling of love, like I felt incredible. I felt so good and so content and so happy with everything in my life. And I remember thinking to myself that if you were to look at like human beings not as individuals but as a whole, it's kind of interesting to think that at every moment in time, if you look at us all as a whole, the human species at every moment in time is experiencing almost every different array of emotion possible. Like there's someone out there right now who's happy, who's sad, who's angry, who's going through difficult times, who just hit the jackpot. Like it's, we're all together, and really as a whole, we're experiencing everything that there is to experience, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing is that the kind of like the first wave of 60s psychedelia, of the idea of like, putting acid in the water and like everybody should be on it and whatever. Like, I don't think that's right. I think that like there's us, there's the others, there's the psychonauts, and we're just a part of everything, like we're a part of that human experience. It's not for everyone, so when you're walking around thinking, these people are never gonna know this, well, you also don't know if it would work on them. What's that? Yeah, that it's not for them. It's not for, and that was one of the lessons I think that, and I said that in the video, that maybe I'm not supposed to blast off, that maybe that's why I get so anxious. Maybe maybe I'm only supposed to dip my toes in. I don't know. I can't beat myself up over not being able to fully let go all the time or at all. I don't know. Like it's like you just kind of got to accept what's going on and accept your place in society, and that just goes for, I'm not worried about people that aren't doing psychedelics, I definitely want to, if someone's interested, they should, because like you said, life is about experiences. And, I really hate that. I just hate the policy of like making it illegal, because that is going to stop someone that is interested in it from doing it. If they're a total rule follower, or, someone, I hate that you can't have it for therapy, because there's so many people out there that have, treatment resistant or drug resistant depression and PTSD and whatever, that would love to go do it, but they would only do it from a therapist and only if it was legal, and they can't because it's illegal, and I hate that. I hate that people that are interested are limited by policy. It doesn't bother me that people that aren't interested in it at all can't have it, because that's probably a good thing almost,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you put that very well. Yeah, all of the research that is coming out now too, that has been kind of revived. All the results from the research is very, very, very interesting. Like, like you said, the treatment, resistant depression, but even the treatment of, a psilocybin dose on quitting smoking. I found that kind of interesting, but yeah, I mean, also just, I guess, one more point that I wanted to make, just to kind of hammer home dose. Like I know you guys have both talked about how you're pretty big guys. I was about 6'3" before my back surgery. I'm about 6'2" now, but about 220. And yeah, I'm just like you. I'm very sensitive to it, and it doesn't take, a large dose to really get what you need, I don't think. And maybe for some people it does, but I think definitely starting low and going higher as you go along is the way to go, rather than just starting so high that you have such a bad experience like I did when I was younger, that you're turned off from it completely for an extended period of time.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, that's when you look at shamans and either with mushrooms or ayahuasca, like do they measure that out? No, they don't have a scale, like it's about the experience, and before I took it seriously, because I was like you, just kind of like you said, that I didn't even know you lying down and closing your eyes on psychedelics was a thing. Like until I started having these solo excursions, I was just walking around with my friends everywhere. Just that's what we would do, walk around woods, parks, cities, whatever, well, we would end up at parties and just acting a fool and whatever. But for the most part, like it was just like a group activity, and so if you would have stopped and laid down with your eyes closed, everyone would start picking on you. So that was the last thing you wanted to do, so like until I started doing that, I did have this idea of like, I could take more mushrooms than him. He's a pussy, so I get that. And so that's where I've taken, at music festivals and stuff like that. I've eaten a quarter. I've done all this, but, I like, until I was sitting at home with intent and with my eyes closed and, trying to meditate and work on breath and all these things that like kind of help you let go. You don't need that much to really have a powerful experience. And that's like the main mantra of my, work here in the psychedelic culture is just that, less can be a whole lot more. And also, to take the spiritual side out of the mushrooms and to look at it scientifically, or not just mushrooms, but, psychedelics in general, is that, not everyone has the same amount of receptors in their brain. Not everyone has the same amount of, enzymes that break this stuff down. Not everyone has the same psyche, and not everyone has the same situation and stress going on in their life. So to expect that same dosages are going to be the same for everybody, that's just not, it doesn't work that way, and I think that's
a great point.
Yeah. And I think, that's probably the lesson that shamans learned, because with ayahuasca and with mushroom shamans, they give you until you're done, until that's where, like they in an ayahuasca ceremony, they offer a second cup, but you're not everyone's supposed to or does come up and get it. I know reading about Maria Sabina's like mushroom shamanism, she gave you 2 mushrooms at a time until you were done, until that was what your spirit needed. And so like that's the lesson over thousands of years that they learned, is that there is no specific amount. And then so now once we have the internet and everyone can argue everything to death and go home thinking they're right, everyone has to like have a specific dosage, and if you don't have that dosage, then you're not right. And so yeah, so I think it's almost we've come around full circle, and I'm hoping that we will relearn the lessons that all the psychedelic culture of our ancestors already learned.
Oh, that's great. That's a really great point.
Yeah. I mean, your experience with 1 gram is a testament to that.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And that was the craziest thing to me. I did go into this Tuesday night trip basically with that. Even having listened to your guys' conversations and podcasts, I had that basic idea that, well, here I'm going to take more, and this will be more intense. And also, I do believe they were different, like mushroom species. Yeah, the one that I took as just the 1 gram, I took a little bit on top of that, so it was maybe closer to 2. But the one that came packaged by itself was really long stem and like almost like a dome of a cap, whereas these other ones that I have are like flat golden capped.
Gotcha.
The cap. Yeah, the cap looked a lot different, but I'm not sure if they were different or not. But yeah, the experiences were vastly different, and a lot of that I'm sure plays into what's going through your mind, your subconscious at the time, and very very different.
Which one was more potent, the domed cap?
Yes.
Okay, so I actually know why that isn't. They might have been different strains. But they were probably the same species. They were probably both cubensis. But I do know that when harvesting mushrooms, the point of most potency of the fruiting body is right when the veil breaks. So then from that point on, the mushrooms will start to get more blue because they're starting to decompose after the veil breaks. They are starting to decompose because they're just need to drop their spores, and the fruiting body's job is done. And so the psilocin and psilocybin start to oxidate, and so the peak potency is right when that veil breaks. And then so when that dries out, it will be a domed little cap. And so when they are flat, what it is someone let them go until they yes, because they pump a little water into them, and you'll get more weight. So if you're selling the mushrooms, you want the cap to be the biggest as possible and everything like that, because you'll have more weight.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
That's really interesting. No, that makes perfect sense. And
yeah,
no, I remember that I was saying that for weeks after. It was just like, I can't believe how powerful of an experience I got from such a small amount there. But yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And if you've ever seen people posting pictures, or if anyone talks about aborts, which are like the mushrooms that start but then don't fully form, those things are potent as hell. Because I've had someone be like, hey, I got some aborts if you want a microdose, and like they look little, so you're like, yeah, I'll take a handful, and then you're like, whoa.
All right, on.
So I wanted to ask you, we always on our Discord channel, we reach out to people that are there and communicating on the forum, and ask them if they have any specific questions for the guests. And I mentioned that you're into psychology. And one of the people that we actually had on the last podcast, which is currently unreleased, but on the last podcast, he was asking how your understanding of psychedelic psychology, that being like Carl Jung, however you pronounce it, McKenna, and the others, has impacted your parenting. And how does having a good root in interpersonal education affect the way you treat your family unit?
That's a super good question. I guess the very obvious and main difference in the way that I've been kind of approaching the whole parenting situation that I think I've noticed myself, but if you were to ask the grandparents around or my wife or the aunties, is above all else is patience. The patience has grown to a point where it's such a human thing to just react to a situation, and I think it's given me a lot more of an ability to stop myself from reacting, look at the situation as a whole, look at what is a rational reaction to the situation, and then to go from there. Because I know a lot of, I mean, when you got three, especially for me, I've got a wife and three girls, so there's a lot of estrogen in the house, and it's pretty easy to just kind of fly off the chain sometimes, and when nobody's listening to what you're supposed to be doing or whatever. But that always ended up with a little bit of a backlash in the fact that your kids aren't really respecting you. They're just afraid of that moment. They're afraid of the repercussions of that moment. Whereas I've been able to do a lot more slow, gentle conversation over why what you're doing might not be the right thing to do, what the right thing to do might be. And all of this stuff is kind of, it seems like common sense, but to actually put it into practice on a daily, on a daily level with your children, I think that the trips, and I had said that after the first one, and to one of my cousins, like, it just felt like it allowed me to be a lot more patient, and to just handle some of the situations rather than just getting angry and trying to make things the right way, to try to help the kids find the right way and help them get there without you pushing them there, I guess. It's maybe the best way to describe that.
Okay.
And I felt in between these two trips as well, I felt like a little bit of that starts to wear away, because I agreed with what you said in a podcast a while back, where you were saying that microdosing kind of keeps you, I guess, in close to that state where you're never so far away from it that you forget everything that you may have learned during a large trip, something like that. But I also feel like in between, once you get to that 6-month time point, basically, to me, it feels like that's when I really do need to make the time to go on another large trip. And then it's like an entire reboot, like I come out of it feeling, again, just much more ready to be slower and calmer and more in the moment, instead of always rushing to an end point, I guess, what you could say.
Yeah. I mean,
it's peeling off a layer each time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, in an ideal world, if I didn't have, any responsibilities to anyone else other than my own spiritual growth and understanding, I honestly would trip at least 2 or 3 grams every full moon, honestly. I think that probably in Food of the Gods he kind of talks about that, and then I've seen some Paul Stamets talking about kind of that wild psilocybin mushrooms tend to kind of flourish and stuff like that when there is a full moon. So I imagine that, there was a much more like ceremonial, moon worship going on with mushrooms at some point in a lot of different cultures. And to kind of take part in that would be great. But then also, like you said, I think, you would lose a lot less of that. And I think
carry it forward with you a lot more, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask, you mentioned, after your first trip, you kind of previously before that you didn't have any like spiritual practice and you kind of DIYing your own spiritual practice. And I'm planning on tripping in a couple months, and I'm trying to do the same amount of prep work. I'm trying to do as much prep work as I can. And I was just wondering, what would you suggest, on creating, I guess, a recipe to practice either daily or multiple times a week to prep for something like that?
Well, for me, one of the biggest keys, like I said, I sat down and did a couple, like, you can find all over YouTube, you can find the guided meditations.
Yeah.
And because the first few times I sat down, I basically just sat on the floor with my legs crossed and my eyes closed and didn't know. I mean, you can't just sit there. Basically, that's, you're just sitting there. You're not meditating. But I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And so I tried to look through a bunch of different guided meditations, and they all circle back to the breath. And so what I then would do, I actually kind of got annoyed with the guided meditations because I would find myself getting to a deep spot, and then, oh, now you need to do, this voice pops up and you're like, oh fuck, like you just ruined what I was accomplishing here. So
Yeah.
I switched from a guided meditation to just finding, I guess maybe some people would prefer perfect silence. So maybe find for yourself whether you enjoy the silence or the music. Like I found this Tibetan music to me is just so calming, and it's really syncs up with my breath really well. And then, yeah, like for me, having the kids, if I have even 5 minutes, if I can sneak away for 5 minutes and, have them, eating their supper or doing whatever they're doing to keep busy, or if I'm lucky, that turns into 10 minutes. But I guess the bigger thing for me was also to not get down on myself when I couldn't fit it in. Because you don't want to, like, there were a few times where I sat down to meditate that I was almost in an irritated state, and it was like I had been trying to get to the cushion on the floor for an hour, and this kept happening or that kept happening, and I don't think entering it into while you're irritated is always a great way to start. But yeah, just the frequency, excuse me, the frequency didn't matter to me as much as the combined amount of time. Like it was just like the first time that I did it back before my wedding, and I laid down with the music, I felt so uncomfortable to lay down and close my eyes in a room. It was almost like I was worried. It's completely irrational worries. Like I was worried that someone was going to walk in and see me, even though everyone's asleep. And I guess just getting comfortable. Like I even told Ruben when I pussied out a little bit on Monday, I spent a lot of Tuesday in the exact spot, in the same room, in the same conditions that I was going to be in for the trip. And that seemed to really get me ready for it. Like being used to being in that eyes closed, focusing on your breath mentality, but also bringing that to the actual spot that I was about to take a trip on, I think was pretty beneficial.
Gotcha. Awesome, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of my mushroom spiel, but I don't know if you guys want to move on to just a little bit of weed talk for a bit here.
Yeah. I mean, we're we're at like a minute or an hour 40, but yeah, like what's it like living in a country that now is fully legal? And you
it's yeah, well, yeah, I'll put it into a nutshell. It's not all it's cracked up to be. It's great in a lot of ways. Like one of the big things, so I live in Manitoba. Our premier of Manitoba, Brian Pallister, is he tried to put up as many roadblocks as he possibly could to the federal government in the process of laying out countrywide legalization. So we kind of got shafted in Manitoba a little bit. Like we're not allowed to grow, every province except for Quebec and Manitoba, you're allowed to grow up to 4 plants in your house. In Manitoba, we're not allowed to grow any. Now that's probably going to change with future changes in who's running the Manitoba government. I don't see why that would be, to me, it's weird. I'm allowed to bring home a kit and make my own beer, which requires, I'm sure, many more steps than growing some marijuana and drying it. Um, but so that, it's a little bit different from province to province. That's basically the big difference, though. In Ontario as well, there's no storefront purchasing at the moment. It's all online purchasing. But so from a standpoint of like quality and price, I've been using medical marijuana for about 7 years, and it started off. The laws were quite different. So when I first started medical marijuana, what I had was a designated grower here in my hometown. And it was pretty cool because basically we both had a license, and it was a little bit sketchy though, because like my license said that I was allowed at any moment. They gave me a 30-gram per day limit, which is huge. And then so that transferred over to me being able to hold 900 grams at any point in time. And it also made it so that we were allowed to grow 147 plants. So out of that, I didn't see, personally did not see 147 plants. So it makes you wonder where all that stuff went. And that's where the government was getting a little worried, was with people growing more than they needed and selling it on the black market, all that kind of stuff. So that eventually changed, so that what we had to do, rather than getting like a license and a grower, Canada has about 32 licensed producers, medical producers across the country now. And what you do is you have to go through your doctor and get a prescription. So then the prescription is essentially like your receipt. I have a 2-gram a day limit, which is much more reasonable. And then basically I have to purchase that online through a company called MedRelief. But the prices are a little high, and the quality is unbelievable, very, very good. And for my epilepsy, like they got me off of, I still take a couple oral medications, but one that they had me on was Keppra. And I'm sure you guys know, your prescriptions, it's an antidepressant. So, being a young guy and being told that I was going to have to be taking this antidepressant for the rest of my life I wasn't comfortable with that at all, because there's so many side effects that are attributed to Keppra. So basically what I was able to do was, now this website has a strain of weed called Avi Dekel, which is, they've bred it so it's got around 16% CBD and like 0.1% THC. So I take that, and it has allowed me to get off of the Keppra completely, which
That's
is great. Awesome. Yeah, it's so good. But then you kind of run into that snafu when it comes to insurance companies. I've had my doctor sign right up an entire sheet. It's called a drug exemption form. He sent that into my insurance company, and they refuse to cover it. So it's like, here, this is helping you, but we're not going to cover it, but we'd rather you take this, antidepressant. So that's frustrating, and I'm sure that kind of stuff will all move along. But the stores here in Brandon that have kind of opened up, we have a Tweed and a Tokyo Smoke, and there's about to open up a company called Delta 9, and they're actually the largest retail marijuana grower in Canada at the moment. They're opening up, I think in Brandon, they're going to be opening up the largest shop in Manitoba, actually. So there's been a lot of mixed reviews. Like if you're somebody who doesn't really smoke up much, doesn't know prices, like if you're an older person that's just kind of interested in getting a little bit, the stores are very, very nice, real nice laid out, great customer service and everything. And for someone who's not smoking on a daily basis, you might be able to go in there, a couple times every month and be satisfied. But there was a lot of issues with the growers having to kind of trim the product and get it ready for packaging before it was actually ready. So a lot of quality issues, just because they weren't weren't ready for the demand. Like the supply and demand it just wasn't there. So even now I go into Tweed, every once in a while, and they don't have anything that I'm looking for. It's always gone. And then the prices were just insane. Like, they were trying, they had a White Widow by Delta 9, which was, beautiful, smelled great, really good, 2 thumbs up on the product, but they're trying to charge $165 for 10 grams, which is, I mean, I don't care where you live. That's just too much money if you smoke on a daily basis. So, what I found is a lot of the guys that I've talked to that are daily smokers, it's still nice, like a nice little convenience factor. If you happen to run out and can't get a hold of your dealer, what I tend to do is I'll go to these stores and just buy pre-rolls. And I even went in there a couple of weeks ago and went up to the till and I said I'd like one pre-roll of your Casablanca, which is an indica that they're selling. And the lady at the till looked at me like I was crazy, like, okay, is anything else, anything else I can get you? And I pulled out my $10 bill and said, like, no, I just want one pre-roll and I'll smoke that tonight, and that's all I'm gonna pay you guys. So I've between my medical and between they're going to have to fix prices and quality, because all that has happened is that the dealers, like the street dealers, have basically higher quality marijuana that they're now dropping prices on drastically because they know that the store can't compete. So what I've done is, a little bit, like I said, a couple bucks here and there at the store. It is nice because you're getting exactly what you're buying. Like there's no guesswork. It's all on the up and up. If you're trying to get a sativa, it's a sativa, so you don't get kind of hit with a heavy burnout in the middle of the day or whatever might happen. But I've also recently switched over to a British Columbia based company. It's called Grass Chief. And they're an online company, and I had to send proof of my epilepsy, proof of my back fusions, all this different medical proof. And so it's a membership based company, so they don't just send it out to anybody. So I ended up qualifying, and they, like I just told you guys, I think it was $165 for 10 grams of the weed in the store, whereas I can get for $160 even, I can get a full ounce of like AAA grade marijuana. You can even mix and match like a half ounce of a sativa and a half ounce of an indica. So for me, that's the route I'm taking now. And I'm just, it's exciting, it's exciting to see the legalization process. There hasn't been, I know CBC News released an article saying that there hasn't been, a huge uptake in impaired marijuana drivers. Like a lot of, when you talk to people before the legalization, it was pretty dry, pretty black and white. People either thought it was a good idea, or people thought that the world was going to fall apart and that it was just going to be like anarchy. And I think we've proven through this short legalization term that's already been up that the world is not going to fall apart. And it's the right thing to do, but they definitely need to do some work on their pricing and their quality for sure to be competitive with the black market. And I've heard several government officials say that if we aren't competing with the black market, then there's no reason to do this at all. So I have faith that will all continue to improve as it goes along here. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean it is pretty pretty awesome to be able to. It's actually it's a mixed feeling. It's pretty terrible to be talking to Ruben, for example, on a chat, and sending him a picture of my marijuana, and then knowing that in the country that you're in, like, you guys can get punished ridiculously for such a harmless substance. My sister got married in Las Vegas, and me and my brother were there, and that was probably the 1 week that I haven't smoked weed, you know, because we just didn't want to risk it. We didn't want to get put in an American prison or anything for smoking weed.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, it's you know, American politics and government is such bullshit anyway, but it is almost basically the one issue that keeps me from really taking it seriously, because of the fact that depending on which set of imaginary lines you are in, you can be put in a cell because of a flower that's in your pocket. If you explain that, and that's, you know, when my kids ask about weed, because now it's impossible to keep your, you know, you can't just say no to weed, like, because they see it everywhere. They see people talking about it. They see it on TV. They see, you know, whatever. They see it in video games and whatever. Like that's how I explain it to them. You know, I'm like, well, depending on what, you know, state you're in, you know, it's just a flower, but depending on what state you're in, you can get, thrown in a cell for it. So, you know, you have to be aware of what laws are where, because of how ridiculous that is. And you can't sell me on any other policy that the United States has while there is this dual problem of what I just said about, you know, a flower can get you put in a cell, but in every one of those imaginary lines, you can go to a store and buy enough alcohol to kill everybody you know. And that, as long as that, you know, double standard exists, I don't give a shit about any policy that anyone wants to argue, because it's all flawed logic as long as that double standard exists.
absolutely. You know? And I'm not sure about you guys, but like with my younger experiences, all it did was hammer home to me the fact that, you know, marijuana is the less harmful of the two. If you're going to put marijuana and alcohol in a room together, when we were, you know, before alcohol came into the picture, yeah, we might, you know, run around the town having a little trip out adventure, but we weren't getting into any trouble. We weren't vandalizing anything. You know, there was no, once the alcohol came into the picture, you started seeing the dark side of some people's personality, where people were trying to get in fights, or, you know, you'd have to keep the car keys away from someone because, you know, you're fucking underage drinking and you're driving. Like, that's, you know, it's not, it was the alcohol that really brought in the danger issues and the dangerous aspects of people's personalities. So, and not to say, you know, I think as an adult, every substance should be there for you. You know, I don't think the government should have the right to bind my consciousness.
No, absolutely.
You know, whatever I feel like doing. And, you know, and it's another, you know, just another hypothetical. Like, if all drugs were legal tomorrow, I know 9/10 of the society isn't going to go do heroin because it's legal. But, you know, to continue to throw dollars and cents at this, at the war on drugs, it's just like, you know, I hope a lot of other countries follow suit, at least with the marijuana, to try to start things along there. But,
well, and I really think that, you know, Canada taking that step, and then, you know, the United States is I don't think we're going to be having this discussion in 5 years. Honestly, I mean, we could still be having the discussion about the pricing and the you know, the industry that comes up around it, because I don't think that will change rapidly. You know, but as far as the freedom, we will have that freedom soon. I you know, that's about the only faith I have in American government right now, is that marijuana policy is going to change soon. You know.
Oh, I sure hope so.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I'd say that's a pretty long episode. It was a great talk, though, and everything. And, you know, definitely, man, thanks for coming on. You know, I
appreciate it. I appreciate it a ton, you guys. You definitely helped me, you know, and I'm sure you're helping lots of other people along their personal journey. So to make a couple of friends along the way is pretty cool. And, yeah, if you guys ever happen to be in Manitoba, let me know. We'll extend the hospitality for sure. So
yeah, we'll go catch a Wheat Kings game. Is that the junior sub junior? That's the only that's the only reason I've ever heard of Brandon, is because like you know, Sabres prospects and stuff that go play for the Brandon Wheat Kings, and I always thought that's just an awesome sounding hockey game.
That's how you can tell we live in the prairies. Our hockey team is called the Wheat Kings, but. Yeah, they ended up, you know, they they've actually pumped out quite a few NHL players from like
Oh yeah,
Jordan
no, that's,
2 would probably be the most
yeah.
recognizable, but
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks for coming on, and we'll definitely talk again. And you know, I hope you have a good new year and all that. And I'm looking forward to you know, this channel growing. And I know you comment on every video, and we know we message back and forth. So I'm looking forward to growing right along with you, man.
Right on. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, you know, anytime I get an opportunity to turn somebody else onto the channel, I do for sure. So
Awesome. Buddy.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
right on. Well, thanks so much, guys.
All right, man. We'll see you.
Take care.
Bye. And yeah, for anyone else listening, you know, I mean, Adam represents, you know, kind of like the type of people that I wanted to reach with this channel, you know, just people that are kind of just, you know, getting along with their life and kind of want to look past, you know, everything that society tries to ram down your throat and realize it's there's more to it than that. And you can live a better life and there's a benefit. But definitely everyone else, you know, we mentioned it a couple times. I keep mentioning it, the Discord server, the link is posted in all the videos. If you want to keep up with kind of this whole discussion of this community, definitely make sure you join that. It's just a text messaging kind of app. It's like a forum. There's different channels and different stuff to talk about. It's really picking up steam since I mentioned it in my last video. And, you know, there's some really good discussions on there and good links, and people are sharing, and, it's just a really good thing. So, I definitely recommend everyone get involved with that. And also, I'll keep throwing it out there. We've only had the one call, but there is the Google voicemail line to call. So, Stahn, what's that number again?
It's 567-233-1335.
Awesome. So, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, thanks for helping find the others.